Hey there and welcome to my channel. My name is Rocco. Glad you could stop by. On this channel I do DAZ 3D videos to help you to get the most out of your own DAZ 3D renders. Now in this video we're going to be taking a look at how we can light up a daytime indoor scene. And we're going to try out three different methods to try and achieve that. Now I'm going with these three different methods because every indoor environment is different. You could have wide open windows that open up into a large room in one instance, or you could just have a room with little arrow slits if you were doing something, for instance, in a castle. And so what it could be that one method works best with, each different type of environment that you go with. Now, if we have a quick look at our scene, though, we've got our model here right in the center. Let me just zoom out a little bit. We've got quite a large room that we're working in here with these big windows looking into the room that we've got. Anybody, by the way, who follows me on DeviantArt and whatnot, you might have seen this image that I've done before. Well, in this video, I'm going to show exactly how I lit this image up that you can see in my gallery. Anybody who's not seen it, if you want to have a quick jump ahead to the final finished product, you can have a little look in the link down below, as you can get the details about this model and such down below also. But I'm going to show in this video three different ways to light this scene, one of them being the way that I actually lit this model for reals. So we've got these three methods for daytime lighting in an indoor scene, and this first method that we're going to take a look at is a fairly old way of doing it. Old, I don't know if that's the right word. It was a way that's been used a lot of the times in the past with people, but it uses artificial lighting, which can sometimes give mixed results depending on the scene and what you do with this, that and the other. If we have a quick look at our render settings over here, we can see that we're on scene only, so only the lights that we put into the scene are going to light things up. So if we quickly just come across to HDRI, everything is black, as to be expected, because there's no lights in the scene at all. So we'll have a look at this first method then, using artificial lighting, and just have a look and see what type of results we can get. Okay then, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is to add a little bit of ambient light into the scene. And this will basically be the entire light for this particular example. And what we'll do, we'll add a little point light in there to provide some kind of sunshiny glow to things a little bit. So what we want to do is want to come back out then to the perspective camera, and then just have a little rotate up so that we can see the ceiling up here. Now that can be turned into one great big emissive that will just generally light the entire scene up for us. Now we have touched on emissives before, and if you haven't seen that video and you're not quite sure what they are, go have a look at it. You'll find the link up there in the top left of the corner. But what we're going to do is we're going to give the ceiling a click so that it selects it in our scene over here, and then in the surfaces tab, which we've got highlighted already, we're going to give the ceiling a click. Now there's 4 bits to this particular ceiling. It doesn't really matter. If you're doing this in a different scene, you might have a different setup here, but it doesn't really matter. But what we want to do is we want to come down to emission color, and we want to change that to any non-black color. And what that'll do is it'll turn then the surfaces here, each of them, into an emissive. So if we come down to that color and we say we'll turn it into white, no, I'll tell you what, no, we'll make it a slightly blue light that we've got, and we'll click OK once we've done that. If we now come back to our camera and come across to Enviroment again and give that a click, we can see that we get this fairly dull and dim lit scene, all being provided from the light that's coming from that ceiling. So what we need to do is increase the luminosity of it. So if we come down to the luminance over here, it's at the default 1500 that these start, or when I'm using this unit, and we just start to increase it. We'll put another 0 in there, see what we get, and we'll put, maybe double that up a little bit to 30,000. And we get there a fairly well evenly lit scene, getting a little bit of ambient light purely coming from the ceiling now up above. It doesn't look very sunlighty, but it does give it a fairly dull looking day that you could say that she's lit up in, even though you can probably see it's a little bit artificial. The next thing that we want to do now is to add in something that will provide that little bit of sunlighty bit that you would expect in the room. So if we come back to the perspective camera, as you can see there, that the entire light up above is all lit up. If we come back now to the perspective camera and just take a look, if we look at the windows here, so we want the light, the sunlight coming in from this direction over here somewhat. So if we just position the perspective camera to an angle which we could say would replicate our sunlight, let's say about like that maybe would do it. And what we want to do is we now want to create a point light in the scene. Again, if you've not messed around with point lights much, make sure you check out the video that I've done on them previously. So what we need to do, we need to come up to create and then to point light. And we want to apply the active viewport transport. So basically it means create the point light at where our perspective camera currently is. And we want to hit accept on that also. You won't see much at the moment because it won't be very much lit up, but if we just spin our perspective camera around and just come back a little bit, there's the light over on the left here. This is the light that we've just added. So if we now come back into our camera view, looking at our model, and with the point light that we've just created selected and come down to the lights tab, we do have to change the colour somewhat because we don't want a white light coming through the scene. So we want to create a bit of a light yellowy or a light orangey colour. How much is dependent on, what type of day you kind of want to set the scene at. We'll just put a little bit of yellow into it and we'll click OK. And then likewise, we're going to have to increase the luminosity again just to give that brightness, a little bit of brightness to that light. So again, we'll put a 15,000 in there. We'll just keep on increasing it until we get something that will be good enough for what we want. And we'll keep on going. We'll maybe go up to 100,000. And for some reason that light isn't lighting anything up, is it? Yeah, there we go. So we need a really big number in there to get this working. It's a bit too much at that point. We'll drop it down by half. Now, what number you put in here is going to be totally dependent on your scene. All these scenes are different. I mentioned it earlier about the ceiling. Depending on what you've got up there, you might have to change the luminosity to get something decent. And you might have to do the same with this point light, depending on where you positioned it and what angle it's all coming in at. So we've got now it looking more a bit sunlighty. We've got these big shadows here, which I'm not that keen on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that light into a rectangle. And again, I'll say it again, previous videos, if you don't know what I'm doing here, this is just me softening the light that's coming in from that spotlight, that point light that we've created. Check it out in the upper right hand corner if you're not quite sure what I'm doing or why. So what we want to do, now we've increased that size of that emitter, we just want to increase again the lumens just so that we can get a more softer sunlighty view coming in. And we've now, it's not too bad an effort for an artificially lit scene to replicate sunlight in the room somewhat. It's not the greatest example because it's not the best way to do it, but if you are wanting to do use artificial lights to light up an indoor scene, that's the olden way of doing it, the more traditional way of doing it. There are better ways of doing it, which we're going to get onto now in the next two examples. Okay, so I've reset everything in the scene now. We've got rid of the emissive ceiling and the spotlight so that now we're back at a dark, empty room. And if I just come back out of HDRI, back to texture, what we're going to do now, we're going to look at the second method of lighting an indoor daytime scene. Now, once more, we're going to be using artificial lights here, but we're going to have the light coming through the windows in our room. So if we just flip out to the perspective view that we've got, we can see the entire environment that we've got here. Our model is just around here, just so you can get your position as to where we are. And as you can see, we've got here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 windows that light can stream through to enter our scene. We're going to ignore this one because this is going into a little bathroom, a little separate room up here. So we're talking these 7 windows where we're going to have light come streaming through the window. And what we're going to do that is we're going to give each window an emissive plane that itself is going to shine light into the scene so that we light up to the entire room. And the way that we're going to do that is we come up to create primitive. We've got the basics here set up. It's going to be a plane, X positive, 2 meter in size, and we're going to hit accept. And there's our plane that we put into the scene. Now it's actually put it in the room. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over here, and if I can grab it, I'm going to pull it outside here, and I'm going to put it right up against the window to begin with. So right up against the window, just get the position of it, bring it down a little bit. And then what I'm going to do, if I come into the parameters tab, is I'm just going to rotate it slightly so that it just gives a little bit of an angle for the light to come into the room as, and then just position it like that just in front of the window. Now we need 7 of these in total, 7 emissive planes shining into our room in total, 1 for each window. Now instead of creating a separate one for each window and then having to mess about with each of them individually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this emissive plane over here and I'm going to create instances of it. I'm going to create 6 instances, 1 for each window. And what that will allow us to do is all we'll need to do is just change the parameters of this one, the parent plane, and it will automatically change every single one for each window. So what we do by doing that, with our plane selected, we come up to create new node instances, and we need 1, 2, 3, 6 in total. So we need 6 copies of this primitive plane. So if I give that a 6, apply default settings, that'll do, and hit accept, and then it's created 6 other example, 6 other of these planes. 1, 2, 3, yep, 6 other, as you can see up here in the scene tab. What I'm going to do, because it's a pain, is I'm going to turn each of them off except one, and I'm just going to work on one at a time. Now one thing I want to do is I want to give that one a click, the original, and just copy the rotation, so all the rotations will be the same. Click the one that we're working with, rotate it around as we do, and then just position it again up against the next window like that. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly jump ahead of you because it might take a couple of minutes to get them all set up. Now as you can see, we have all of these planes set up, rotated and pointing into our room through the windows. 7 of them in total. This one is our master, and each of these ones are a copy. So whatever we do to this plane here, and at the moment it's just a plane, it's just a square. Whatever we do to this one in its properties, it will replicate it automatically on the other 6 here. It's just to say it was messing about with 6 different lights or 6 different emissives, 7 different emissives even. We'll just play around with this one and it should change every single one of them by themselves. So what we'll do, we'll come back into our scene and look through our camera at our model, and if we come on to HDRI, we can see that everything in the room is black because this is still just a plane. So like we did previously with the ceiling up above, what we're going to do with the original plane, the actual geometry selected, come down to the surfaces tab and onto plane, find emissive color, which is here, and we have to change it to anything but white to turn it into an emissive. And again, we'll just go with that little, well, we'll go a little bit yellowy, should we? Go white, and then I'll come in a little bit yellowy and just give it an OK. Now what will happen is that what we've just done on that plane will be replicated on all of these instances. Now there's nothing to actually see here because they're only a virtual copy, but they'll all be doing exactly the same now as what we are setting in this surfaces tab. Now everything here is of course a little bit dim. We can just kind of make out the outline of our model here if we squint a little bit. So of course we need to brighten things up. Now again, we're only going to be brightening up that first master plane that we created and set up, that primitive that we set up and we turned into an emissive. All of the instances will just automatically follow exactly the same settings that we're creating on this master. So what we need to do, come down to the luminance and just step it up, start brightening it up and see what we get to. So now it's a fairly dim image still, but we can at least make out some more details. We'll step up again just to bring a bit more brightness, and again probably one more needs to be done. add another 0 on there. And you can see now our model is fully lit up. All of those instances that are down here are copying this one that we're actually changing in the surface settings here, and it's created a fairly acceptable daylight, sunny, lighting in the room, and all just by changing that one emissive light that we set up, and all the instances are just following suit. If we just come back round to our perspective view for a moment, we can see the window. We can see our model lit up. We can see the window with the big bright white. It's these instances that are outside the plane originally, but these are the instances, and you can see that they are bright and lit up, putting light into the room as they would and as you would expect. And they actually do create a quite a nice little lighting effect that we've got there. You can play around with the colour and play around with the brightness intensity as much as you want to get the look that you want. Incidentally, you can see you've got the big bright white bit there. If you had a background there and we were positioning our camera somewhat from this angle, obviously you don't want to be showing the planes as they're putting the light into the scene. So all you'd need to do is just go to the original plane, turn it into a ghost light as you would normally do, and it would make that plane, that instance disappear, or the white bright light in that window disappear, and it would be able to show you background. There's a link up in the top right hand corner there of making ghost lights work in 4.2 if you missed it previously. But yeah, that's the way of doing it, using lights shining into the room. It can produce a fairly decent, a decent effort. Probably better than the original one that we did earlier, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Once more, everything has been reset. The plane primitive and the associated instances have been deleted, and we're back to our basic dark scene with no lights in it, which is all good. Now we're going to take a look at the third and final way to light up an indoor scene during daytime, and this is the method that I normally use to light my scenes with. It's because it's simple and it's quick and it's easy. And the way we're going to do this is by doing away with artificial lights completely. Now, when I say artificial lights, I mean, of course, all light in DAS is artificial. Of course it is. But what I'm meaning when I say artificial are things like spotlights, things like point lights, lights that wouldn't normally be present if we were in this scene for real. For instance, if you're watching this video at home now in daytime, you're not lit up with spotlights and point lights or anything like that. You're just lit up with natural light, sunlight, and nothing artificial. Now, there are two ways that we can achieve that. Firstly, is with the sun sky only option over here in our environment mode, or by using an HDRI environment map. Now, in this example, I'm going to use the HDRI as I say, it's simpler. And in fact, like I say, I always use a HDRI, and I always use this method when I'm doing so, just basically because of its simplicity. So what I'll do, I'll switch over to dome only in the environment mode. And as you can see, I've already got a HDRI map here set up in my environment map slider in the environment setting. Now what I'll do, I'll put a link to this map down in the description below. It's a freebie, you can download it for free, so you can grab it and use it yourself if you want. But it's one of the ones that I'll use quite a few times when I'm doing things. So now with that environment map selected and all base things, other than the rotation, I've changed the rotation so the sunlight is coming through the windows. We'll just come across to NVIDIA iRay Preview again, and we'll have a look at what we have got. So as we can see now, we have our model in the room lit up by our HDRI. It's very dark and dim, don't worry about that, we'll sort that out in a minute. And if we just come out to the perspective camera for a moment, we can see outside the windows the HDRI map that we use because we've got the draw dome on, and we can see that the light streaming in through the windows at this strange funny little angle that we've got, and our model is sat here up against the chair, not in direct sunlight. That's an important thing you've got to remember. Whenever you're lighting anything with any sort of sunlight, try not to have the light shining in the face. It produces ugly results and you want to try and avoid that. But we've got the light coming in, we've got the direct light from the sunlight, which we can see on the floor in these areas here, or up against the wall up there. And if we spin around our perspective camera for a moment, and I've just got to work within the confines of the environment here so I don't mess up. We've got the light coming in from that angle over there. If we just come out with our perspective camera and then just rotate up a little bit again. I've got to try and do this so we can... There's our light coming in the room. So if we look at the angle that we're at and then we come down, so you can see that the light is coming in from that angle, and that's just the way I've set it up, just by moving the dome rotation. Obviously, if you want a different angle, just change that number. So if we now come back to our camera, looking at our model, as mentioned, she's a bit dark and a bit dingy at the moment, but there's a few ways that we can fix this, and there's a few ways that we can solve this. I know a lot of people would advise putting a spotlight in and lighting her up. Please get out of that bad habit. Stop doing things like that. You're killing your images by doing things like that. We've got this natural light coming into the room. And what we want to do, it's a bit dark, it's a bit dim, we want to brighten things up. Now, there's a number of ways that we can do this, okay? We can come across to the environment map or the environment intensity over here, and we can change it. We can increase the map and we can increase the intensity. Let's say it's currently on 2. Let's say we move it up to 10. It brightens things up a little bit for us. Let's say we go up to 20. It brightens things up a little bit more. Let's say we go up to 75. Now I know that because that's what I've used previously. We come up to 75 and we light our model up using the HDRI, just using the HDRI from the outside, producing this nice bright sunlit effect that we've got here, which you can see building up. There's one downside to using this technique, and I don't know if you've noticed it. It takes actually a lot longer to get rid of the grain in your image, so your render times will be increased somewhat. And the reason being is because we're actually working with a low amount of light, and as we all know, iRay loves light, and if you don't have much light in there, it takes a while for it all to clean up and for you to get a clean render. So using this method will increase your render time somewhat. So just bear that in mind. If you haven't got the top of the range graphics card, things might be a bit slow dependent on your scene. Now we can light the scene up as I've just showed there using the environment map brightness over here. This environment intensity over here will work exactly the same also. But what we can also do is we can come across to tone mapping and we can play around with the exposure values of the camera. Now, what you do with the tone mapper, these are post-process things, so this will all work a little bit quicker, or the effects will, and you can actually play around with these during your render while your render's running. So what we can do is, the main ones you want to be looking at are f-stop and film ISO over here. The lower the number the f-stop is, the brighter something will be. So if we knock that down to a 6, it will brighten things up a little bit. Knock it down to a 4, it'll get brighter still. Knock it down to a 2. Now all these things are just doing all the same thing, and you'll notice the exposure value up there is the thing that's changing. You're just changing the amount of light that the camera's picking up, and you can just change it and impact upon it in any which way that you want to see fit. If we put f-stop back to 8, back to its base, we can play around with film ISO, whichever you're comfortable with. They all do the same thing, but this time the bigger the number, the brighter the image will be. So it's at 100 at the moment. We'll go up to 200, brightens things up. We'll go up to 400, brightens things up more, up to 800. You know, and just play around with these things until you get the clarity of image that you want. It'll all be dependent on your scene and your initial lighting levels that you have in the first place. But yeah, that's doing it with a HDRI, the simplest, easiest method. I usually just use the environment map number, even though it takes a little while to render. But yeah, that's using a HDRI to light up a room, an indoor room, and just playing with the tone mapping settings or the environment brightness to get the final look that you want. And so there we have 3 ways to light up an indoor daytime scene within DAZ 3D using either artificial lights, emissives, or an HDRI like what we've used at the end there. Like I say, using the HDRI method can be a little taxing on your system if you don't have a top end or a mid-range GPU. mid-range graphics card, and it can slow your renders down a little bit because you're using a little, a little amount of light usually when you're shining an HDRI through a window. Now that's why I've included the other two methods, just to help you out if that is a bit too much for you to cope with for your system. Now hopefully you've got something out of this video that you can put to good use in your own renders. And if you have any questions or comments, then feel free to drop them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can on them. Also, if you haven't already, please could you consider subscribing and liking the video, which really helps me a lot with the algorithm, the YouTube algorithm. And also as well, there's a new little feature there called Super Thanks down below, where you can make a direct little tip if you want to the channel, just to help the channel grow a little bit. It'd be really appreciated if you could take up that option and just show a little bit of love my way. But that's it. 3 ways to light up an indoor scene. I hope you've got something out of it. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye bye now.